Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Angela Puca and welcome to my live symposium. As you know, I'm a PhD and a university lecturer, and this is your online resource, but now it's an online live Q&A to, discuss things with regards to esotericism, magic, as we usually do from an academic point of view. And you may ask, why do you put it, on screen during the live streams? And it's to sort of make it clear so that when people ask questions, know that that's the kind of angle that we are going to have on this channel. So let me see who's in the chat. I already saw Andrew and Alessandro, who are directly from my inner symposium. They are my patrons. Thank you for being here. And I can also see some regulars here. Oh, there's also Jessica and Alessandro Di Gino. It's nice to see some of my patrons here. Hello, Amethyst Rose Witch and Saleh Dura and Joe Fontaine. There are a few of the names that I recognize because you guys tend to comment quite often on my videos. Obviously, if a person only leaves one comment, it's difficult for me to remember that person. But then when you guys comment over and over, then the name sticks a bit better, and so I remember you. Hi, Edward Iglesias and Vitriol Earth. Oh, hi, Joao. And Zakaria and Eric. Oh, Eric says, I'm a great fan. Oh, thank you. Oh, hi, Joe Stone. Orden. And John. Nice to see that there's quite a few of you guys. Andrew was saying, my burning question is, how is Dr. Puca going to be celebrating Puca Night? Yeah, I think I should repost last year's video. I made a video on Samhain, and apparently one of the names of Samhain is Puca Night. So, which is funny. It's like, before moving to the UK, my surname literally meant nothing to me, because in Italian it doesn't really mean anything, but then I learned here that it is actually meaningful, especially in Irish. So how am I going to celebrate? I don't know yet. Hopefully something will come up by the time Samhain or Halloween comes. Lots of love from India. Thank you. And hi, Thomas. Hi to you and to Teresa or Teresa. So nice to see all of you here, guys. So how are you? Do you have any questions? Anything that no dancing palm trees, says Puca Night. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it was quite a surprise for me when I discovered. And also, you may know Dr. Jenny Butler. She and I are friends, and she's also a scholar. She studies Irish folklore and Irish paganism and witchcraft. And she told me that there was the Puca festival, and it's like, I think that was the first time that I actually realized that my surname, the way it is spelled, not differently, was an Irish term to mean the Puc or the Puca. It has different spellings, but yeah, that was quite interesting to discover. Doug says, hi, doctor. Question, will you ever discuss African traditional religion? I'd like to. Yeah, I already have a video on African American hoodoo, but it would be interesting to cover those ones as well. The list of things that I'd like to cover on the channel is pretty endless, to be fair. My main issue is a lack of time. So I'm quite fortunate. I'm lucky that I'm getting commissioned videos now. That's quite, it's quite important because it allows me to keep doing the work that I'm doing on my channel. That, and of course my Patreon community and those who are nice enough to join the channel or send one-off PayPal donations. As I always mention, it is thanks to your support that this project is still ongoing, and yeah, I can still do it, because otherwise it would be quite impossible, I'm afraid. But yeah, the list of topics that I'd like to cover is pretty endless, but definitely African traditional religions would be one of the things that in the future I'd like to cover. So Marcel Gomez says, having lived in Ireland, I always found your first and last names very suitable for an esoteric an esoteric scholar, I guess. Yeah, I guess so. I always liked my name, Angela, which comes from the Greek angelos, angele, angelon, and it means messenger of the gods. It is a specific term for messenger in ancient Greek. It's not just messenger. It is like a messenger between the words, or a messenger for the gods. And also another interesting thing is that the anagram of my name and surname in Italian means pagan light, which is, yeah, it was, I was once with my friends and we were trying to, play this game where we would try and see whether the anagrams of our names would mean anything at all. And in the cases of some of my friends, there wasn't really any specific meaning. But then when I tried with my name and surname, that came up, and it was like, whoa, that's interesting. So Thomas says, we talk about books about Italian folk magic and how accurate they are. When are you writing a book on it? That's a good question, Thomas. Actually, I recently got my book proposal accepted by Brill, which is an academic publisher. So I will be publishing a book on Italian witchcraft next year, hopefully. Obviously, I've got to do it. So apart from my university teaching position and YouTube, but that is one of my top priorities, to have this book out, because I'm aware that especially for Italian Americans, this might be quite important as a publication. So I really look forward to publishing it. But yeah, I've got to work on it. But at least we've got the book proposal out of the way. But then when the book is written, I have to amend my PhD dissertation, and then it will have to go through peer review, and then so it's gonna be a long process. But hopefully by the end of next year, it's gonna be published, if everything goes well. Fingers crossed. So let me see other questions. Kevin Jenkins says, I have been reading a book called Homo Sapiens from Eden to Armageddon, and I wanted to know if manifesting phenomenon in reality begins with thinking of an event to happen so much that it transpires. It's a bit unclear as a question, but if your question is whether things manifest from the consciousness or whether it's the other way around, I guess that it's kind of a question of what kind of philosophical stance you're trying to take, whether you are an idealist or an empiricist, perhaps. Joao asks, will you consider making videos on historical esoteric hoaxes? Give me some example, Joao. Alessio Di Gino is asking, from one of your last posts, I realized that besides white magic and black magic in Italy it is used as well red magic. Can you please explain? Oh, yeah. Are you referring to a post in the Patreon community? Because I can't remember whether I said it on my YouTube channel publicly as well. But yeah, I actually realized recently, and I was chatting with my patrons about it, that in Italy, beside white magic and black magic, there's also red magic, and that's quite common. I mean, you find books in the bookstore on red magic spells and these kind of things. But apparently, it's not a thing in the Anglophone world, which kind of surprised me. And red magic is magic for love. Basically, that's what it is. It's magic for love and relationships, and I guess sex magic, but not really sex magic. More attracting in your life, a partner or a sexual relation. So it has to do with magic to attract love and passion. So honor Kylek says, will you consider making videos about astrological magic, especially the Pika tricks? Yeah, that's definitely another thing that I'd like to cover. Actually, I wanted to invite a scholar, but I think she just retired, and she specialized in astrology. That would have been a good introduction to the topic. But yeah, I'd like to do that as well. Mm. Yes, Andrew. Andrew identified the anagram, which is Luce Pagana, pagan light. Congratulations on your book deal. What amazing news. Yeah, it's an amazing news. Although, with academic books, it's never, the deal is not sealed until it has passed peer review. So it's kind of, but it's a first step. Hello, Raziel. Cool, I was just wondering if you had a new vid. Hello. Also, Joe Jones basically happened to be here because you were trying to catch up the new video. That's nice. Joao says some examples. Pierre Plantard and his Templar shenanigans. Yeah, I have to look into that and see what kind of research has already been published on the topic. Kevin Jenkins is asking, are you familiar with psychic vampirism and the feeding techniques? If so, how old is psychic vampirism? Yeah, I am familiar with what it is, but there isn't much research done on the topic. When I talk about research on the topic, you know that I'm not talking about books that get published and you find in bookstores. Usually the kind of information that I deliver on this channel, I'm sure that most of you are aware, come from peer-reviewed scholarship, which is a specific type of books and articles and scholarship that is peer-reviewed and is academic. So one of the issues that I have with addressing certain topics on the channel is that in some cases, even though I personally know about the subject and perhaps I have read primary sources, which means the books that are written by other practitioners, there isn't much research done on it, which is the secondary sources. The secondary sources are the academic studies on the primary sources, what the practitioners write and say and do. So in some cases, there isn't much scholarship. Like, for instance, I've been wanting to do a video on D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, for a long time, but there's nothing academic on it. That is so disappointing. But yeah, that would be nice to nice to do. But I don't know how old is psychic vampirism. I would need to have proper sources to answer that question properly and not just make up an answer. Edward Iglesias says, I always understood the concept of red magic was part of black magic since it involved influencing someone's will. Well, the matter of the influence, whether influencing counts as black magic, I know is debated within the practicing communities. It's not as clear cut because one may argue that any kind of magic is a form of influence. So if you cast a spell to get a job, you are influencing those that have to make the decision to choose you and not to choose somebody else. And you don't know how much the others need that job. Perhaps they may need it more than you do. So I think that it's very interesting to see. Actually, it would be interesting to sort of investigate the moral philosophy or the ethics within magic practices. I mean, how magic practitioners define their ethical values, because it's quite varied. And even with the distinction between white magic and black magic, it's quite, I think it was clearer in the past, and now it is getting more blurred for practitioners. So Gerson Embalo, hope I'm not butchering too many names, but I apologize if I do. So question, is there or what's the difference between spirituality and the occult, esoteric knowledge and spiritism? Can one walk the occult path without spirituality and vice versa? Oh, I think you're talking about spirituality and not spiritism. So the difference between spirituality and occult, esoteric knowledge, that's a bit difficult to define in a clear-cut way, because I imagine that different people will define it differently. But I'd say that usually practitioners define spirituality as a way of engaging with their spirit. So as a way of working for their higher self, working with their higher self and working for their higher self, and with the divine. So I guess that spirituality is a way of connecting to your higher self and to the divine, however you define it, whether the universe or the gods or one god, or the totality of spirits. And also, yeah, it is a way of connecting, I'd say, with the divine and the higher self. And occult knowledge or esoteric knowledge can be, that really depends how to define that. Like for Wouter Hanegraaff, a very famous scholar in the field, he defines esotericism as rejected knowledge. So all the forms of knowledge that have been rejected by the mainstream culture. So in that sense, esoteric knowledge would be the knowledge that is concealed and in a way rejected and marginalized in the within the dominant culture and by the dominant religious system. But esoteric and occult knowledge can also be a knowledge that goes beyond the five senses and beyond the means that we have to acquire knowledge in a way that is currently considered to be a valid way of pursuing knowledge. So that might involve intuition or the use of correspondences. So I guess that the two can work together, spirituality and occult knowledge or esoteric knowledge, or they can be disjointed. That really depends on the practitioner. So what else do I have here? So Simon says, "Hey Angela, what's your opinion on the significance of the use of the Athame in magic rituals, and do you have one yourself?" I guess it is Athame, the one that you were trying to spell here, and it is notoriously used in Wicca, especially in traditional Wicca, and it is used well. It's kind of it draws on ceremonial magic practices where you have the use of wands and swords, and the Athame is used to cast the circle, usually in Wiccan rituals. And whether I have one is not something that I'm gonna answer. Ariel Glories is asking, what are the 3 magical traditions you'd love to learn everything about? 3? Only 3? That's a difficult one. I guess I'd like to learn more on voodoo and what can be the other 2. Santeria and also Kemetism. But it's not like they are my ultimate favorites. It's just that I'd like to learn more about these traditions and perhaps make videos about it. Are you familiar with the ghost dance rituals from Native American Lakota? I'm curious how it measures against the elements of necromancy. No, I'm not familiar with that ritual. Perhaps my supervisor might be, because she has done field work with the Lakota. Casey Roca says, that's like mysticism and magic, both can be done separately. Yeah, I'd say that another term for spirituality could be mysticism, but these are very difficult terms to gauge and define because different practitioners may have different ideas. Oh, hi, Doug. Thank you very much for your donation. I enjoy your videos, very informative and interesting. Keep up the good work. Thanks. That's very appreciated. Let me see if there are other questions. Oh, Andrew says that Justin is also into D&D. Yeah, we could do like a discussion. There's also one of my colleagues at my university. She's a D&D player. And I told her that we could have a discussion. She's a philosophy lecturer. So we could do something on the philosophy of D&D or something. Zakaria asks, are you familiar with demon path workings? Would you provide your opinion on the subject? Well, as you know, I don't usually provide opinions. I try to offer on this platform the academic research that has been done on certain topics, because I think that it's beneficial to the practicing community. I'm aware that most of my subscribers and the people who watch my videos are practitioners and not scholars, although there are some scholars as well, but the majority I think are practitioners. And this kind of knowledge, the research that is going on among within academic circles, and then that gets published in peer-reviewed journals and with peer-reviewed publishers. These tend to be studies that are not quite open and accessible to the public and to the practitioners. So that's why I really like to share that knowledge with you guys. So I'm not sharing my opinion on demon path workings, but it'd be nice to see what kind of research has been done on the subject. Unfortunately, research on historicism is still, there should be more done. Definitely. There are so many traditions that need further research. It's just that it's difficult to persuade universities or research bodies to fund this kind of research. But hopefully we will help we will help the cause by making people realize that this kind of research is important to people and it has an impact. Ariel Glories, you're welcome. Darcy Smith is asking, how accurate is the Durkheimian idea that religion originates as a worship of society? Oh, hi, James. Nice to see you here, and thank you so much for your donation. You're always very generous. And it's also nice you're super effective. So back to your question, Darcy, how accurate is the Durkheimian idea? So Durkheim is famous for having said that religion is a public endeavor, whereas magic is an individual endeavor. And so for Durkheim, magic is not as beneficial to society because it tends to be more individualistic and it kind of divides instead of allowing people and the community to stick together. How accurate it is, I think it's a bit outdated. Of course, Durkheim is still one of the one of those thinkers that you have to study if you do anthropology or sociology of religion, but I think it's outdated, and I don't agree. I don't think that magic is a private endeavor necessarily, and I don't think that religion is a public endeavor necessarily. I think that in both cases you can have a public and a private sphere. Even with magic, especially now that obviously in the past it used to be more practiced privately because it was forbidden and it was less accepted. Now it is a bit more accepted, although of course it's still kind of rejected from the from the dominant culture, but it is a bit more accepted to the point where people can do workshops and have bookstores and have public lectures or public festivals and fairs and these kind of things. So those are definitely public endeavors, I'd say. Oh, hi Thomas, thank you for your donation. Hey everyone, help her out. Teachers are paid in chickens. That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, it's funny because university always have money to employ new managers though. But yeah. So let me see if there are other questions. I consider my magic simply magic. I don't distinguish one from another. Amethyst Rose Witch. Is it are you referring to discussion black versus white magic versus red magic, or was it about something else? Astro Gypsy, I would love an episode on the satanic panic. Have you watched the the interview with David Robertson on conspiracy theories, because he mentions something about it, but it would be interesting actually to cover satanic panic. I think it's one of those things. I mean, it's one of those occurrences where you have a polarized opinions and polarized views that become endemic, and sometimes the group mentality and group thinking tends to go in a very dangerous direction. So thank you, James. James Roland. Thanks for the chicken. Now I'm gonna, every time that when I get paid from my university, I will think of chickens. Thanks to you guys. But yeah, tools help set the mood, but intention is what matters. Without intention, the tools are useless. That's a long-standing debate, whether intentions are more important than... I think that tends to be a popular belief among practitioners, although not all agree that intention is everything. But some practitioners would say that it is part of it, part of the whole picture. Doug says, as a practitioner, I kind of have a trouble reconciling astrology with astronomy. What are your thoughts on the two and their differences? Thanks, Doctor. I think that both astrology and astronomy are very interesting. Of course, they are different disciplines, but they both deal with stars and planets, clearly. But astrology is based on the presuppositions of astrology are more or less the same of magic. So there is this idea that you have hidden forces and hidden correspondences that have an influence on our lives. Whereas with astronomy is more interested, is focused on understanding the planets and how the universe physically works. Whereas with astrology, there's more of an interest on the influence that the movements of the planets have on our lives and the things that can happen in our lives, and that is based on a magical thinking in a way. That is based on the concept, that is based on Hermetic philosophy and the concept of the correspondences, and the fact that things at a distance can influence each other because everything is in a way connected and interrelated, and you are part of this fabric, and once you move the right string or the right thread, you are able to move something at a distance. So let me see if I missed anything else. Hi, Ron Fiasco. Hello, Doctor and chat. I'm late. Well, but you're here, so... Is there a study you can recommend on the commonalities of deities and practices across different indigenous cultures? Deities and practices across different indigenous cultures. Well, this is a question. This is kind of a question that comes from. Oh, thank you, Zygmunt, for your donation. Another chicken. Sorry, now that will stick with me. So your question about commonalities of deities and practices is kind of is clearly a question that is not coming from an indigenous mindset, but more from a transcultural mindset. Because if you've ever watched any of my interviews on transcultural shamanism or transcultural traditions and indigenous traditions, you will see that, oh, hi, Mark. Thank you, Vocatus, for your donation. That's really appreciated. You guys are being very generous tonight. Thank you so much. Well, it is kind of evening for me, but perhaps it's early morning for you. But as I was saying, there's a difference between indigenous traditions and transcultural traditions. In the West, our Western mindset tends to focus on the transcultural aspect, on transcultural traditions, and one of the main differences is that in indigenous traditions you have a lot of focus on the culture, and in transcultural shamanism you have a lot of focus. Oh, thank you, Nicholas, for becoming a member. And in transcultural traditions you have a focus on techniques, on finding the underlying the underlying principle or commonalities among different things. So your question is actually transcultural in nature and is not kind of following what an indigenous tradition would be all about, because indigenous traditions are all about the specificity and the locality and the context. So even if you were to find commonalities between two different indigenous traditions, they would be averse. The indigenous tradition would tend to be not like the idea of two different deities to be combined together because they have a couple of similarities. Whereas a more transcultural approach tends to do that and try and I wouldn't say merge, but kind of associate different deities or different entities of different practices based on certain similarities or commonalities. So I hope that answers your question. Let me know in the chat. I think that I got a message from YouTube saying that every month channel members can ask an highlighted question, but yeah, you can try and see if that works. Sometimes I get these messages from a YouTube creator on the new things that they have implemented. So Francisco Santana, the sacred and the profane, Micheliade. Yeah, Micheliade is very loved by practitioners and not so much anymore by scholars, but I think that he's one of those thinkers that you can just not, skip. I mean, they are fundamental, I think. And even though in terms of research, his methodology now would not be considered valid by contemporary academic scholars, but I think it's still extremely important. It has been very important in the formation of many of the concepts that we have, including that of shamanism. Ron Fiasco says, in all honesty, I find being completely clear of any substances, including food, helps with spiritual work. Okay, that's a conversation among you guys that I didn't follow. I think you were talking about substances during rituals. Libra Scorpio says, would you say visiting homelands as a practitioner is important? I'm Sicilian and Armenian and feel I should visit to truly connect, especially in magic. That's one of those questions that, it's difficult to answer as an academic. But what I can say is that, that I study Italian witchcraft. and it is considered important to connect with the place. Yeah, that tends to be a commonality that you find across different indigenous traditions, is the idea of the connection to the land. And so if you're trying to practice a tradition that stems from a specific environment, from a specific place, it is usually considered important to connect with that place. Absolutely. Because it's a way of, like, in shamanic practices or even in witchcraft, there's the idea of having allied spirits in a way. And you have spirits of different sorts according to practitioners, and some of these spirits would be the spirits of the land. So if you are practicing, I don't know, Italian witchcraft or Armenian witchcraft or whatever kind of witchcraft you're trying to practice, if that is not a tradition based on the techniques, but if it is an indigenous tradition that is connected to a specific place, to a specific culture, then it would seem like connecting to the place is normally considered important by traditions of this kind. So yeah, one day I will organize, a sort of a trip to Italy. I know that lots of you might be interested in doing something like that. Yeah, that would be amazing, actually. To the different magical places in Italy. There are so many. There are so many magical places in Italy, in Turin and in Naples and in Sicily. So Nicholas Porter asks, do you have any thoughts on a most complete magical system? What do you mean by complete? And is that a good thing? Andrew says, I can scry an Angela Symposium tour to Italy being organized sometime in the future. Did you write that comment? Did you write this before I said it, Andrew, or was it after? Simon, any plans to have Professor Ronald Hutton on again in the near future? Actually, it was interesting because when I was in Pisa for the conference of the European Association for the Study of Religions, I got approached by a postdoctoral researcher, and he said he went to Professor Ronald Hutton at the University of Bristol, and he said that he was about to retire in a year, and he said, if you want a specialist, you should go to Dr. Angela Puca. And so he came to me at the conference, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it was I was pleasantly surprised, but I'd like to actually go and see him in person, perhaps next spring. I'd like to go to Bristol and meet with him. On that occasion, we might also film an interview. That would be nice if he agrees on that. But Professor Hutton is a fantastic person. I cannot stress that enough. It's one of those cases where you've been admiring this person for years and years, and then when you meet them, it's like you also realize that he's a wonderful human being, and it's like, wow, these are the people that really remind you that it's worth being in a community and doing your best and try to be like them. So Ron Fiasco, I would have to visit the Abbey of Telima in Cefalu. Yes, that should definitely be part of the tour. So Andrew, take notes. Yeah, because in the inner symposium in my patron community, Andrew is the one that always reminds me of of the things that I forget, um, which is really nice. Uh, so, oh, Andrew says before, just or you're just showing your divination techniques. So Nicholas Porter, right, I just started working on enochian magic or learning about it at least. It seems beneficial, but I am new to that sort of idea. Yeah, enochian magic is a very um, structured and quite interesting and also complex, I'd say, system of magic. But um, yeah, good luck with that exploration. Let me know how it goes. Marcel Gomez, I'd love to go to Cefalu too. So Boleskine is closer to me. James Rowland, question: what is academia's view on the differences and similarities of high magic and low magic? Mm. So usually by high magic, the idea is that high magic is the kind of magic that pursues more forms of mysticism, and low magic tends to be more focused on mundane achievements. So low magic would be more about, you know, finding a job or a partner and these kind of things, whereas high magic is more about connecting to the divine and the higher self and you know, more mystical endeavors. So what's academia's view on the differences? um I guess that in this respect, mm, I'm not sure I understand your question, to be fair, James. Because the difference is the one that usually practitioners make. At least in anthropology, they tend to uh, sort of report what are the differences that are drawn by the practitioners. But I'm not sure if you mean from a historical point of view or for a specific tradition, or whether or specific reinterpretations by, I don't know, other magic practitioners that wouldn't call their magic as high magic versus low magic. Oh, hi Cipriano. Andrew says that he has a spreadsheet. You're more organized than I am, Andrew. So Casey Rocca says, Angela, I loved your interview with Dr. Manon Hedinburg White about Babylon. As someone new to the occult and Thelema, it was very interesting to watch. Oh, thank you, Casey Rocca. Manon is quite. I really like her, and actually, I saw her in Pisa. I saw lots of people in Pisa, as you can tell, but it was the European conference, so it was to be expected. But yeah, we had drinks and lots of chats. So she's a brilliant scholar. Yeah, I'm really glad that I got to know her and interview her for the channel. And I think her research is so interesting. And also she writes beautifully. I mean, I don't know if you have read The Eloquent Blood, but it's beautifully written. Apart from the fact that obviously the content is well researched and everything, but I really like her writing style. So Ron Fiasco, even the Enochian deck, I had it for a while. Okay, you're still conversing about Enochian magic. Mm. But James Roland, do let me know if I didn't understand your question. Whether there was something specific that you'd like to know about the difference between, whether there are similarities. I guess it may depend on the traditions, but the similarity would be perhaps the practice of magic, the belief, the underlying belief that magic is part of the practice. Darcy Smith is asking, is there any evidence of satanic worship before the modern era? Or were those all examples of social panic and Satanism is purely a modern phenomenon? I did a lecture on Satanism for my Magus level patrons, and I recall from that lecture that the first accusations of Satanism, organized Satanism, were from around the 13th century, if I remember correctly. But yeah, at first I think that the accusations of being satanic, of being Satan worshippers were directed towards those who would not follow who would not, follow Christianity properly, properly according to the Orthodox. But yeah, the idea of Satanism has been around for a very long time, definitely before the modern era. It's just that what we now understand as Satanism is more of a modern concept. It's more of a modern concept based on the worship of Satan, whereas in the past it was more the idea of being adversarial towards a certain religious orthodoxy. So that is what is new, what is more modern, if that makes sense. What do you think of the philosophy of Julius Evola? From an esoteric point of view, it would be interesting to cover. Of course, I don't want to. That doesn't mean that I endorse right-wing fascist ideas, but I'm usually in favor of studying history regardless of these kind of elements, and also studying the history of esotericism and addressing those matters when it is pertinent. But I wouldn't, if I ever make a video on Julius Evola, it doesn't mean that I'm fascist. just to put it out there. So, but Julius Evola was influential. I cannot say that he was not influential on, especially on Italian esotericism in the 20th century. So perhaps in the future I might make a video on him. It's one of those topics that you have to be careful how you address them. Laurie Hamel says, please do an episode on the women of high magic. Thank you for all the time and knowledge you share. Oh, thank you, Laurie. Yeah, I hope to do a video on that in the future. So Rob Horner is asking, any commentary on Dean Redding's statistical empirical research book, Real Magic? I'm not familiar with that book. I have to look it up. Thank you for the recommendation. Francisco Santana, I'd like to translate the captions of your videos to Brazilian Portuguese. Oh, Francisco. Yeah, I did see a comment on Instagram, I think, but then I forgot to reply. So yeah, I will get back to you on that. Thank you for reminding me. So Aries Draco, ancient satanic worship is very unlikely. It is like calling your rivals cannibals. Um, Edward Iglesias says, we know your allegiance is with the chickens. Well, if we're still using the metaphors from earlier in our chat, I'd say that if my allegiance was with the chickens, I have made all the wrong decisions in my life. Clearly, being an academic and studying this kind of matters is not very conducive to chickens. um, so as Cactus Flower says, "Hail chicken, Edward Iglesias," and Andrew says, "Maybe we should found a chicken-based order." This chicken thing is is escalating very quickly. So Haytham says, do you have any information or thoughts about the influence of Kabbalah on Spinoza's philosophy? Oh, no, I'm not familiar with that. I know that Spinoza was excommunicated from the Jewish community in Amsterdam. So my guess would be that, he was not particularly influenced. And also the Kabbalah spelled with the Q, as you did, Haytham, is the one is the Western esoteric Kabbalah, is not Jewish Kabbalah. Oh, hi, Jeanette. Thank you for your donation. That's really appreciated. Mike Weird says, I so much appreciate your channel and knowledge. It's just awesome. Oh, thank you, Mike. That's very kind of you. Mm. So Simon is asking, what is your opinion on the limitations with regards to the compartmental nature of academic study of magic, opposed to free-flowing intuitive practice? I don't think it is compartmentalized at all. I'm not sure what you mean, Simon. Uh, Maybe you mean... Do you mean the academic study of magic generally? Because the academic study of magic is not compartmentalized. It's more like every scholar will focus on a specific tradition because, otherwise, how can you get accurate knowledge if you don't spend enough time and enough energy on one specific tradition? That wouldn't be possible. So that's why in academia and in science you have very narrow specialisms, because otherwise you wouldn't get thorough knowledge on anything. It would just be too generic. And when things are too generic, they don't really mean anything. So I don't think it is opposed to free-flowing intuitive practice. I think that the intuitive practice is what practitioners do. I think that, this is something that I have repeated, especially in my patron community. My patrons know that very well. And that is that I am delivering academic knowledge on this channel, and I am an academic, obviously. I work at a university and I'm a researcher. But that doesn't mean that I think less of the practitioner's perspective. Actually, that is not the case at all. It is just that academic knowledge uses one methodology and practitioners use a different methodology. So the reason why I offer academic knowledge here on the channel is that I think that is a gap that needs filling, and I think that practitioners can benefit from having more knowledge and do what they want with it, even discard it and continue with their practice the way they want. Ultimately, religious and spiritual practices are a matter of personal beliefs and personal practice, and they enrich the person first and foremost. But for some people, part of that spiritual achievement, part of that purpose is acquiring knowledge. So for lots of people, having knowledge and having accurate knowledge on the topics they also have a religious belief and a religious interest in is quite important. And so I'm here to offer knowledge, academic, scholarly knowledge from peer-reviewed scholarship and research. And then practitioners will do whatever they want with it. It's not like it is hindering anyone's intuitive path or practice. It is just knowledge that is offered for anyone to do whatever they want, including just putting it aside and continuing to do whatever they had been doing up until that point. The Order of Academic Chickens. Yeah, Thomas, you have started. So we're all just chickens trying to determine if we are eggs. Yeah, degrees in chickenology. As I said, it has escalated very quickly. It's gonna become an endless joke on this channel. Ron Fiasco says, the egg is sacred. I prefer using the symbol of a flower. Oh, nice. Orchids are nice. Oh, thank you, Alessandro. Alessandro Vigilante. I'm using the Italian pronunciation. I hope that is fine. But it's actually a name that I have seen like in my home region in Italy. Ron Fiasco says, I like the academic aspect of magic. Hence the method of science, the aim of religion. That's a nice way of putting it. Simon, I'm glad you appreciated the answer. Haytham says, is there a difference between esotericism and mysticism? It's difficult to say. My guess would be that esotericism is the study of things that are esoteric. Esoteric means hidden or reserved to few people, and exoteric with the X is the public knowledge. So the esoteric knowledge is the private knowledge. The exoteric knowledge is the public one. So it's more like secretive knowledge reserved to few initiates. That's the esoteric. So esoteric knowledge is the knowledge that you acquire through an initiation process, or because it is connected to occult practices and magic. But that is more of a more recent understanding of the term esoteric and esotericism, or as Hanegraaff says, rejected knowledge would be esotericism. But originally esotericism was meant to refer to the knowledge reserved to the few that were initiated in one tradition or another. It was even used in philosophy, for those disciples that were in the inner circle. So whereas mysticism I guess would be more what we call spirituality, like the connection to the divine, however the person pictures the divine, and the higher self. So Aztec General, are you familiar with the works of Dr. Algis Uzdavinis? He was a hermeneutical scholar from Lithuania. No, I'm not familiar with his works. I should look them up. Leave the name in a comment so that I can look it up afterwards. Academic police, I can see, is engaging with the chicken, the chicken joke. Yeah, we should all thank academic police for keeping everything in order. Although now, on this occasion, everybody is being very nice and polite, but unfortunately, every so often we get not so very nice people joining the chat. So, Ron Fiasco, one of the things you taught me, I know a lot, but I'm always just a student. Yeah, it's like Ron, I still feel like a student. I mean, technically I'm not anymore. It's like I've been a student for, whatever you can be a student for. I have my qualifications and 3 degrees and a PhD, but I still feel like a student. It's difficult for me to see myself as a, professor or a lecturer, as they say here in the UK. But yeah, I think that I will always consider myself a student. I guess a researcher kind of gives me that sense as well. Because when you are a researcher, you are researching. So it's not like you have the answers. And that's nice. It's always better to have more questions and settle for answers and never allow them to change. So Darcy Smith is asking, does the term esotericism make sense these days, since hidden knowledge has become democratized and easy to access with social media and internet? That's a good question, Darcy. And I think I'm gonna meet. Oh, by the way, did you guys like my short? I started making shorts for the YouTube channel. It's just that I don't like how they look on a computer screen. They look nice on smartphones, but not on computer screens. But let me know in the chat box here or in the comments whether you like my shorts. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, that I was planning on making a short on the idea of occulture, and the idea that now in our culture the occult has become not as occult anymore in terms of it's not hidden, it is openly talked about, as we are doing here now on YouTube. But the thing is that the occult is not defined as such just because it used to be hidden, secretive, and concealed knowledge. That was the case because it was not really accepted. You could incur into different kinds of risks by openly talking about these kind of things. Now that is not the case anymore, but it still makes sense to talk about it as occult because it still deals with occult forces that are, we are openly talking about these matters and this subject, but the how it works is still through occult forces, like you have the correspondences and all these all these laws of magic, but they are still hidden, they are still occult in a way. It is still unclear how they work, it is not yet understood, so it is still part of it is still occult in that respect, I would say. And also, not all magic traditions are open about what they practice. There are still lots of occult traditions or esoteric traditions that would only share their knowledge with the initiates. So I have been exposed to some of these, so from my research. So yeah, definitely not all traditions are open to the public, but some are. Some forms of magic are openly discussed, but I would still that they are still occult in that other sense. So Alessandro is asking, oh, bye James. James Roland is leaving. Have a great day, everyone. Great stream, Dr. Puka, as always. Bye, James, and see you in the inner symposium. Alessandro is asking, do you feel the symposium itself is forming a society? Do you think that? I think that the inner symposium, perhaps our patron community, is, I wouldn't say a society, but it's a nice group. And especially with those that have been there quite for a long time, I think that we are forming a very nice community. I'm not sure about the YouTube channel, but I can see there are some people that are regulars on the channel, which is nice because I start to recognize your names. Bianca Cartin says, "Thank you so much. It's been really informative." Oh, thank you, Bianca. Sometimes I'm a bit worried that my Q&A live streams are not as informative as the my usual videos, but it's also nice to engage with you guys. So, Aztec General is asking, do you think that magic is just the early form of theurgy? What if magic is just meaningless religious practice? I'm not sure I understand your question. But what if magic is just a meaningless religious practice? Well, define what is meaningful then. I guess that really depends on the person and the practitioner, but I would say that something has meaning if you give it meaning. Otherwise, anything arguably could be meaningless. Aztec General is asking, can I donate through PayPal? Yeah, you can if you want. And thank you for considering that. I usually put a link in a pinned comment on all of my videos. I will put it on this video as well. I usually do it before it gets publicly released, but in the case of a live stream, you have to do it afterwards. But I will put my usual pinned comment with all the links to support the channel. So yeah, I guess that we can end the live stream here. It was really fun having this conversation with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And if I forgot to answer to any of your questions that just slipped through and I couldn't see them, please just leave them in the comment section down below. And if you are watching this after the live stream, please do let me know in the comment section what you thought of it and whether you have any questions. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And obviously, if you did like this video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please share my videos with friends of yours that might be interested in the topic. It really means a lot and allows our project to grow. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and as always, stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.